In this edition of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Chantal Vallerand, the Executive Director of Drug Free Kids Canada. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, what is your job?
So my job as the Executive Director is to do outreach to increase awareness about our organization and make sure that parents, families know that we exist.
And you exist because we're living in dangerous times, aren't we?
Correct. Yes. We have a member of our board that says something interesting. In Canada, we have the most, the highest quantity of lakes in Canada, right? And we could decide as a nation to avoid anybody from drowning, to drain all these lakes or put fences around these lakes. But we can't do that. What do? We teach our kids how to swim. So at Drug Free Kids, I really don't have any say in what is going to be the offer as far as drugs are concerned. But we want to equip kids to make sure that they have the right information to make healthy and informed decisions for them.
You pointed out to me that we're living in a time where there's no margin for error, though. Mm-hmm. It's pretty challenging.
It's pretty challenging because the level of toxicity, 20 years ago, a kid wants to experiment, maybe using alcohol and drinking a little bit too much, then the body is telling them that it's going a little over the top, they get nauseous, and then they know. Unfortunately, if a kid tries to experiment, for example, with pills that are laced with fentanyl, and we aim not to be alarmists. We don't want that. We know it doesn't work. But at the same time, a pill could definitely kill you. Vaping, if a kid initiates themselves through vaping cannabis, it's 97% potent, right? So whereas a regular joint, back in the day, 5, 7, 8%
right.
THC, 97%. So imagine introducing yourself to cannabis through a 97 potent THC cannabis. It's the margin of error is getting narrower and it's dangerous.
So is most of your job going out and sharing information like this?
I try.
Or are you running an organization?
I run an organization. I have people. We have an outreach person who gives webinar. That's his sole job. Gives webinar and presentation, develop content with all of this wonderful information that we get from our university professors and our experts. But this is my day-to-day stuff. So I just have internalized that narrative, and as you can tell, I'm quite passionate and I'm happy to talk about it.
So are you mostly outward facing or are you mostly inward facing in your role? Like
in my role, yeah. I do it all. We're a small organization. We're 5 people for a nationwide organization, right? So, and we work with a small budget. We're a charity, so I don't really have the luxury to just orchestrate this and then delegate. We roll up our sleeves, but I like that.
Okay, so you go and you talk.
Yeah.
Are you doing fundraising?
Yeah, but I have a national director of philanthropy, Paola, who I'm very, very grateful for. And yeah, so I'm in a situation where I have to do pitches to an organization and let them know our contribution to society and ask them if they want to be part of the collective effort.
Wow. And then you've got to manage an office.
Yeah, well, yeah, we all work from home. So
okay.
Regardless of COVID, so I have people I have a board across Canada, Debbie Doucette here from BC, but I have staff in Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto.
Wow. And so what's a typical day look like for you?
Oh, there's not a whole lot of typical days. I spend my life in front of a computer, in front of a screen, but I will meet with potential funders, so either a private foundation or a philanthropy branch of a large national organization to see if there's some alignment with our mission to be able to showcase what we do, to explain how different we are, complementary to some of the services that they may be funding, really try to highlight the value that we bring so that we can raise money to cover our operations. And then I'm bilingual. I was didn't speak English until I was 17, to be honest, French speaking first. So when we provide webinars, then I will do the actual webinars in French. So we just did one last week called The Prom to Remember. So to equip parents to talk with their teens as they go into graduation and prom season. So my staff who does the English webinar, like the English staff did the English webinar, the next day I provided the French webinar to parents signing up, developing content, validating, making sure that I'm on top of what research is happening on the advisory council side of things. So working with doctors who are studying vaping, for example, and unfortunately, the prevalence of vaping has gone up significantly. So being on top of this research so we can translate that into the content that we're developing so that parents can use that in conversations.
Wow. So how many days a week do you work? 7?
No, I work 5 days a week. It's just like, but it's always
really?
there.
You can turn it off on the weekend?
Well, yes, yes and no. It's something that I'm very passionate about. So any chance that I can get on my little soapbox and convert people to come to us and to even understand that we exist, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But no, I can get a good work-life balance.
But I can't imagine that you could do this work unless you were passionate and consumed by the value of what it is that you're doing.
Correct.
So do you feel like your work helps you to gain a sense of being a strong contributor to society?
It's important to me. I started my career in advertising. Back in the day, I did an undergrad in communication, and then I did an MBA, and really I loved the advertising world. It was a beautiful transition from young adult to starting a life in something that, and so I would move from one meeting when we're talking about oil change to a meeting when we're talking about burgers, but to a meeting when we're talking about suicide prevention, because I was working with the Ministry of Health and Social Services. And that's when I knew that fueled me, right? That I felt important. It was interesting to see how many oil change we could market, but at the end of the day, the social aspect of it was really attractive to me.
So when you were in your post-secondary education, what did you study?
Communications.
Communication, not marketing per se, but communication.
No, communications.
But that led you to advertising.
Correct.
How long did you do the advertising before you say you now knew what your calling was?
So I studied communications, then I worked in advertising for 5 years, then I stopped and did an MBA.
Yeah.
And then I thought that it was more of I like the creative aspect of things, but I like to line things up. So how do we finance things? How do we make that happen? So wearing that hat was interesting to me.
Yeah.
But within that context, I went back to advertising after my MBA, but I strictly then worked on social causes. So Ministry of Health and Social Services, Elections Canada, providing the information to be able to vote, engaging people at that level was with the driving factor.
Wow. Okay. So at what point then did you start to transition to your current role?
Okay, so it's an interesting path. So I went from advertising to moving to a new city, which was Ottawa. So in Ottawa, what's the driving force in Ottawa? The federal government, right? So anything that's politically related. And I so happened in my path to run into Jack Layton.
Ah.
Yeah. And so I was asked to come and give them a hand in the lead up to the 2011 election, where the NDP actually got official opposition at a federal level. And because of my experience in advertising, they were looking into making gains in Quebec. At the time, we only had one MP in Quebec. So we were developing advertising for Quebec to really get them to pay attention to the NDP. We didn't have strong roots there. So I did that. And in the role that I was at, it was more operational. I took care of finance. And I took care of compliance with Elections Canada. So ultimately, as Jack would say, just make sure that I don't go to jail and that we don't go bankrupt. So that was my mandate, right? And then I was still very entrenched in social issues and that kind of thing. Then I went and worked with the Canadian Association of University Teachers, defending academic freedom and precarious work and making sure that our universities were properly funded in terms of making sure that science was protected and all of that. And then naturally that led me to Drug-Free Kids. I was headhunted for the position, and then everything aligned, right? Like when I started in advertising, what really was driving me was social causes with youth, sexual harassment, suicide prevention, and then all of a sudden I could combine all of that and be in that role and feel like I could make a significant contribution.
So did you get recruited for this?
Yes.
And how long ago?
5 years ago. It was 5 years ago, 3 days ago. So it was my 5th year anniversary.
And you love this work?
I love this work.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And interestingly, on the plane today, I was sitting beside somebody who worked in the non-for-profit for the environment. She was recently retired, and she said, there's no harder job than being an executive director of a non-for-profit, because at the same time, like, you constantly have to prove yourself. And you work for a board of director who may have a vision of how you should be doing the work that you do. You also have a target audience that you have to provide resources, but you have funders, and you have to make it all fit so that the funding will allow you to bring it forward. I find that part challenging, that constant burden of trying to fund, because most organizations will do short-term funding for long-term results, right? Like, we'll give you funding for 1 year and provide services, but then when am I supposed to tell the parents after? Sorry, we can't give you a webinar in your region because I'm no longer funded. But if you wait a year, they'll fund us again then. That gymnastic can be tiring.
What do you think it has been about you from your own personality perspective that has led you on this path?
Wow. I have no idea. It's just something I was compelled to. When I was working in advertising, I was doing volunteer work on the side, right? I was compelled to making use of my time. I was somewhat envious of people that it was obvious to them, like doctors. They go to work, they save lives. Wow, like, that's easy. They come home, they know that they did it. But I was thinking, what's my contribution to society, right? So I think that now it's all aligned. I can get paid to be able to help people and feel like what I'm doing matters.
So was it curiosity? Was it openness? Was it, I want to make a contribution that kind of kept propelling you towards this? Or did it just kind of unfold?
All of the above. I never had a strict career, like I never thought in 5 years I'm going to do this, and in 5 years I'm going to do this. Things fell into place.
Yeah.
But I also think that I made the right decisions at different points in my life to be able to get where I am. But yes, I've always been curious and driven, but I'm a joy seeker, to be honest. I like to enjoy what I do in everything that I do. I try to make lemonade out of every situation. So I think that this job is allowing me to do all of this.
Well, thank you for what you do, and thanks for giving us a little glimpse into your life and your career.
Thank you for asking.